The Cosby parents and their children were professional and upper middle class, representing the 21.2% of the black community who qualified for that status. Though their fictional experiences were by no means universal, the depiction of a regular black family enjoying life in comfort rather than simply surviving it reflected the growth that more black Americans had made in the past decade. They lived in considerable numbers in Hamilton Heights of Harlem, Baldwin Hills of Los Angeles, McGregor Park of Houston, Cascade Heights of Atlanta, and Chatham of Chicago. As for the growing group of black celebrities, their success also seemed to suggest that maybe the days of racial inequality were over. The achievements of their private and professional counterparts, aka Buppies, hinted this too. Buppies were usually different than the black middle class because they often came from humble or poor origins instead of money. In 1984, Black Enterprise asked, "Are you a Buppy? No? Wanna bet?" It went on to humorously describe Buppies as ambitious wealth seekers who watched movies with subtitles and preferred sushi over soul food, unless the fried chicken and collards are served in restaurants where the tab for two would have fed a family of 4 for a week when they were kids. It ended by saying, "Aspiring for the finer things in life is wonderful. We need more folks who know that squash is not just a vegetable." Political analysts of the time theorized that Buppies were the new group to court, citing their key role in the election of various black mayors. Published the LA Times in 1985, they're more politically active, more critical of traditional black leaders, more distrustful of whites in general, and, most importantly, more likely than other blacks to vote. A 1988 Ebony magazine article delved further into the contrasting worlds of these rich blacks and their rich white counterparts, writing, "Nowadays, the black rich live right along the white rich in the luxury co-ops and condos of New York and Chicago, and in the best neighborhoods in Houston, Minneapolis, and Malibu. They buy their Brioni and Chanel suits in the same stores, sip Vichy water and Sancerre in the same private clubs, and have the same stockbrokers." One millionaire quoted in the article, Dempsey J. Travis, hinted that it was all smoke and mirrors. "I've studied this thing for years, and I can tell you the blacks with money may travel in the same direction as whites with money, but we're never a real part of them. You may even have more money than they have, but in most cases, you're just a rich, lucky black. You're different, and they never let you forget it." Said Thomas E. Kavanaugh, "There is a deep feeling that their position is precarious, that it could all be taken from them tomorrow." In a February 1982 poll, 30% of respondents thought the government was paying too much attention to blacks and other minority groups. Reagan's strategy to deal with black people was simple: not be overtly racist, but still let the racists know he was nobody's liberal. It was no secret that at least 70% of black people disapproved of Reagan, while less than 20% of whites did. While vowing he would be committed to equality, he also said he would reverse affirmative action programs that would become quota systems. While paying lip service to equality, he supported racist schools like Bob Jones University, who didn't want to be taxed for staying segregated. And when 1965's Voting Rights Act was set to expire in August 1982, Democrats proposed a FEX test that would judge nationwide discrimination in voting, and Reagan opposed it. In 1980, he had called the Voting Rights Act humiliating to the South and tried to weaken it, but after intense lobbying and backlash, he eventually extended the law. He also vetoed the Civil Rights Restoration Act in 1987, which specified that receivers of federal funds must comply with the civil rights law in all areas, not just in programs that get the funding. Thankfully, this was overridden by a Democrat-led Congress. Then, of course, there was the war on drugs, which incentivized and facilitated the mass incarceration of black men. All the while, Reagan insisted he wasn't a racist and won support, cosigns, or celeb PR moments with well-known black Americans, from Muhammad Ali to Michael Jackson. Muhammad Ali in particular had endorsed Reagan for his 1984 re-election because he wanted to keep God in schools by bringing back school prayer. Black conservatives had always been around, but they gained more visibility during the Reagan years, endorsing trickle-down economics, calling for harsh sentencing laws, and/or opposing affirmative action. The differences among black people were all over the place, by the way. In a 1985 Black Enterprise survey of 2,000 middle-class and Buppy readers, results showed that when asked about who they supported in the Palestine versus Israel conflict, 57.8% said neither, and 29.6% said they supported Palestinians. When asked if American businesses should divest from South Africa to kill apartheid, 20% said no. When asked if black people should form their own political party, 66.8% said no. When asked if they believed was there a difference between the Democrats and Republicans, 61.5% said yes. Another 60% said the women's liberation movement, which improved birth control, divorce, financial access, etc., was not significant employment for black women, and 70% said that white women, many new to the workforce, were taking black jobs. Nearly 72% of respondents said racism in America was as prevalent in 1980 as it was 10 years ago. A 1985 cold call survey of 1,200 black people that Ebony titled, "What Do Black People Want?" offers more insight. The three most pressing problems mentioned were unemployment, education, and racism/racial conflict. Housing and crime rounded out the top five. When asked what would be the best way to reduce crime, 36% said better supervision of children by parents, and 33% said more jobs. A combined 20% called for more police on duty, longer jail sentences, and using the death penalty. 6% called for prohibiting handguns. 53% of respondents said the number of unmarried mothers worried them a lot. Furthermore, 24% of the participants didn't care about apartheid in South Africa or race relations in America. 75% called Jesse Jackson the most influential black leader. 1% admired Louis Farrakhan. 71% said the government should be spending more on the war on drugs. And nobody said anything about HIV or healthcare. Fighting white supremacy, both the old kind and the new, sneakier kind, and making the world a better place meant different things to different types of black people. The chasm between black Americans who voted Democrat or Republican was growing wider. There were older black people who were committed to Republicans even after the platform switch that drove white racist Dixiecrats into the GOP. And many were as religious as they were loyal. Then, of course, there were black people of all ages who wanted influence and power in a clearly conservative nation. Said one fashion show producer Republican in 1984, "It's nice to know that you can get on the phone and call the vice president or Barbara Bush and that they'll return the call." Everyone wanted different things. What were the priorities? Return phone calls, jobs, immigration? As discussed in earlier episodes, there were over 8.3 million immigrants during the decade, some documented, some not. About 25,000 Haitian refugees arrived with approximately 125,000 Cubans after Castro opened the port of Mariel. Called boat people, the Haitians had been arriving since the early 70s, fleeing from their country's dictatorship. Though the Haitian dictatorship was very cruel, it was one of America's anti-communist allies, meaning the government didn't want to alienate it. So America labeled the Haitian boat people as economic migrants rather than political refugees, making them ineligible to receive asylum. The Carter administration beefed up its program of detaining migrants, which had been in the past a last resort. During the Mariel boat lift, Reagan decided to send a message to future asylum seekers. Beginning in May 1981, all undocumented Haitians were detained without the possibility of bond. Observers criticized the treatment of Haitians and other black immigrants versus the treatment of Cubans. Published Ebony magazine, thousands of blacks from Haiti, from Ethiopia, from South Africa, from all over, who escaped terror, poverty, and incarceration in their homeland, only to find prison-like detention camps and harassment in the United States. By 1982, there were nearly 2,000 Haitians held in detention camps, jails, and prisons in 6 states. Haitians inside and outside of the detention camps protested the treatment of refugees several times, including in September 1981 when hundreds of them started a hunger strike, rioted, and some escaped into Miami. Most were apprehended. In 1982, all of the refugees were ordered to be let go by a federal court, which also ordered a return to paroling refugees. The Reagan administration decided to fight against accusations of being racist towards Haitians by expanding the detention program to include the jailing of all aliens, including the flow of Central Americans we discussed in episode 1. Though there was a solid group of pro-immigration supporters in the black community, especially when it came to black ones, combination of xenophobia and fear of crime meant widespread support of anti-immigration legislation among certain groups of Americans, including black people who were nervous about a shrinking population of those who descended from the enslaved. At the start of the decade, there were 816,000 total black immigrants from Jamaica, Haiti, Nigeria, and more, in addition to their 27 million black American brothers and sisters. And by 1990, there were over 1.4 million total black immigrants, and even more in other racial groups. Ebony magazine used census data to predict it is quite possible that the Hispanic population in the U.S. will surpass the black population within 35 years. Some Native black Americans were disgruntled and felt marginalized when it came to job opportunities and policy priorities, a trend at various points in America's past. And in the 80s, black politicians in areas seeing rapid Hispanic population growth feared a loss of power. When members of the Congressional Black Caucus were given the opportunity to vote on what would become the Immigration and Reform Act of 1986, the black members who voted against it came from districts with substantial amounts of Hispanic constituents. The bill would legalize the status of Cubans and Haitians whose cases had been pending. In 1980, the National Black Independent Party attracted around 2,000 delegates to its founding convention. Attendees strategized on how to work within the electoral arena, and its charter and constitution called for equal gender representation. The party lasted for 6 years. Even while being established as an alternative party, they pushed Harold Washington's 1983 bid for Chicago mayor and Jesse Jackson's 1984 presidential bid. During the last episode, we discussed Jesse Jackson's historic run for the presidency in 1984. He would take another stab at the job in 1988. He stunned the nation when he won the Michigan caucus with 55% of the 200,000 votes cast, double the amount for Michael Dukakis. Why can't Jesse be nominated? Newspapers asked during the 1988 primaries. One of his standout proposals was reprioritizing the war on drugs to focus on suppliers of drugs rather than punishing users with mandatory minimum sentences. Jesse Jackson didn't win the Democratic nomination.